All right then, let's jump right into this deep dive on sleep. You brought A Good Night by Arnaud Veere. So I'm guessing you're looking to say goodbye to those sleepless nights, huh?
Yeah, hoping to, haha.
Well, I have to say, I am really curious about one thing in particular this book's take on the whole 8 hours of sleep thing. It always seemed a bit arbitrary to me, you know?
Yeah, you're in for a treat then.
Yeah.
Veere really digs into that. He actually suggests that we might not need a full 8 hours after all.
Really?
Yeah, he focuses instead on the 90-minute sleep cycle and how that plays a much bigger role.
The 90-minute cycle. So you're saying it's not just about the total number of hours, but more about how those hours are, like, structured?
Exactly. Think of it like riding a Ferris wheel. Every 90 minutes, you make a full rotation. You go through all the different stages of sleep, light sleep, deep sleep, and then that REM sleep where we dream.
Okay.
And ideally, you want to wake up naturally at the end of one of those cycles to really feel refreshed.
That makes sense, I guess. But what happens when your alarm goes off in the middle of a cycle?
Well, that's usually when you wake up feeling groggy and disoriented, even if you've technically gotten enough sleep. Like, imagine getting off the Ferris wheel before it comes to a stop. Kind of jarring, right?
Totally. So what you're saying is, if we can understand these cycles, we can actually, like, hack our sleep a little bit, wake up feeling more refreshed.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, that would be a game changer.
For sure.
But so, okay, let's break these sleep stages down a bit more. What's actually going on in our brains and our bodies during each of those phases?
So in that first stage, light sleep, our brain activity starts to slow down and we can be woken up really easily. This is actually where that whole funny thing happens when you completely forget a conversation or a thought you had right before dozing off.
Wait, so there's a scientific reason I can never remember what my partner's saying right before I fall asleep? I thought it was just me.
Let's just say it's a good thing those late night chats aren't usually recorded for posterity.
Right.
So as you go into stage 2, your heart rate and body temperature drop even more and you become way less aware of, well, everything around you. Then stages 3 and 4, those are what we call deep sleep. Those are super crucial for things like physical restoration, hormones getting regulated, and even memory consolidation.
So deep sleep is like the good stuff.
Yeah.
Hitting the reset button.
Exactly.
And then there's REM sleep. That's the grand finale, where our brains are super active and we have those crazy, vivid dreams.
Yeah.
It's kind of wild how much is going on when we're, seemingly out cold.
It really is. And it's actually this whole intricate dance between your brain activity, all these neurochemicals, and your hormones. It's like a chemical symphony, as Veere calls it. You've got neurotransmitters like serotonin, which makes you feel drowsy, while others, like norepinephrine, keep you alert. And then, of course, there's melatonin, the sleep hormone, which is super sensitive to light exposure.
So it's like this perfectly orchestrated system, which makes you realize how easily even little disruptions can throw the whole thing off.
For sure.
And speaking of disruptions, the book also gets into how things like caffeine and alcohol can really mess with our sleep cycles. This is probably where my afternoon coffee habit gets called out.
Well, let's just say that caffeine can be a bit of a troublemaker when it comes to sleep.
Right.
Basically, what happens is that it blocks this neurotransmitter called adenosine. And adenosine is actually what makes you feel sleepy. So when you get that burst of energy after your coffee, that's actually the adenosine being blocked, delaying your sleepiness.
Okay, so that afternoon coffee might be my sleep's worst enemy.
Yeah.
But what about those times when I'm actually trying to wind down, but my brain just won't quit?
Yeah.
It's like my to-do list is playing on repeat. I'm really interested in this whole stress and sleep connection that the book dives into.
Yeah, that's where A Good Night gets really interesting. Veere doesn't just mention stress in passing. He really breaks down how it affects our bodies, explaining the science behind those sleepless nights. He actually compares our brains to this, courier service that's constantly delivering these vital information packages throughout the body. And when we're stressed out, it's like that whole courier system gets completely overloaded, messages get lost, they get delayed, or they just never even arrive.
Wow, that's a really vivid way to put it. So it's not just that our minds are racing, stress actually throws our whole system out of whack.
Exactly. When we're stressed, our bodies release all these hormones like cortisol.
Right.
And that can actually interfere with the production of those hormones that regulate our sleep, like melatonin. It's like a vicious cycle, stress messes with your sleep, and then not sleeping enough just makes you even more susceptible to stress.
It's like a downward spiral. And it's not just those huge life events that throw us off either, right?
Yeah.
The book also talks about how everyday anxieties, even just information overload, can mess with our sleep.
Yeah.
It's like we're constantly bombarded with news and social media and these never-ending to-do lists.
Oh, absolutely. All that constant stimulation basically keeps our brains in this state of hyperarousal, which makes it so much harder to actually switch off at night. Think about how many times you've scrolled through your phone in bed and ended up feeling more wired than relaxed. Veere really wants us to be mindful of that constant information overload and actually create boundaries to protect our sleep.
It's so true. Easier said than done in our always connected world, but it definitely makes you think twice about those late-night scrolling sessions. Now, speaking of things that keep us up at night, the book also looks at how our emotional lives, relationships, love, even loneliness, can impact sleep. That really stood out to me because it's not something I'd really connected before.
It is super interesting how connected our emotions and our sleep actually are. When we experience really strong emotions, good or bad, like the excitement of new love or, even the heartache of a breakup, our brain chemistry literally changes. And those changes can definitely show up as sleep disturbances.
So love can actually be a sleep disruptor. That's kind of romantic and terrifying at the same time.
Haha, right.
But the book actually gives some practical tips for how to deal with those emotional ups and downs without totally sacrificing your sleep, right?
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance. Like, if you're feeling anxious, Veere suggests things like mindfulness exercises, meditation, even deep breathing to help calm your mind before bed. And when it comes to relationships, honestly, communication is key. If your partner's snoring is keeping you up, or if you have totally different sleep schedules, talk about it. Find solutions together.
That makes so much sense. It really highlights how important it is to have a sleep-supportive environment. Not just physically, but emotionally, too. So we've talked about stress and our emotional lives, but there's another aspect of sleep disruption that I found really eye-opening: shift work. The book really sheds light on those unique challenges faced by people who work, those unconventional hours.
Yeah, shift work is a prime example of how our internal clocks can clash with external demands. Our bodies really crave routine. But for shift workers, that routine is constantly disrupted, and it creates this mismatch between their sleep-wake cycle and the natural rhythm of day and night. Veere actually points out that this can have some pretty serious consequences, things like a higher risk of heart disease, obesity, even depression.
It's like their bodies are in a constant state of trying to catch up, always adapting to a new schedule. But there are some things that can help, right? Remember the book talking about light therapy and melatonin supplements?
Yeah, definitely. Veere really stresses how important it is to create a consistent sleep schedule, even on your days off. And to optimize that sleep environment as much as possible, minimize light and noise. Even small changes like blackout curtains or earplugs can make a big difference.
That's good to know. Even in those situations where it feels like sleep is totally out of your control, there are still things you can do. Now, before we move on to actually creating that perfect sleep sanctuary, we should touch on another topic there. The book addresses addiction.
Right.
Because Veere doesn't shy away from the tough stuff, and he talks about how addiction, whether it's substances like alcohol or drugs or even sleep medication, can really mess with our sleep.
That does.
It seems counterintuitive at first. You'd think that something like alcohol, which makes you feel drowsy, would actually help you sleep better. But the book actually points out that it disrupts sleep, especially later in the night, and you end up with less restful sleep overall.
Exactly. And then there's sleep medication. While it can be helpful in the short term, Veere is cautious about long-term use. He really stresses that relying on medication to sleep can turn into this dangerous cycle of dependence, and then you end up with even worse sleep problems in the long run.
It's like putting a Band-Aid on a much deeper wound. It's not actually addressing the root causes of your sleeplessness, just masking the symptoms, which can actually create even more problems down the line. Veere really wants people to dig deeper and find healthier, more sustainable solutions.
Yeah, it really is amazing, all these different factors that we don't even think about that play into getting a good night's sleep.
Yeah.
But, okay, let's talk about creating that ideal sleep sanctuary. I am ready to get started on turning my bedroom into a sleep haven.
Well, get ready for some serious inspiration, because Veere doesn't just stop at blackout curtains and white noise machines. He actually goes way back and talks about the cultural history of sleep, like how different cultures have designed their sleep spaces for optimal rest.
Oh, interesting.
For example, did you know that in traditional Japanese culture, people sleep on a futon on the floor?
I didn't.
Yeah, and it's believed to promote spinal alignment and a deeper sleep. Wow, I never knew that. I always thought those, big plush Western beds were like the ultimate in comfort. But I guess it makes you wonder if we've been missing out on something. So what other sleep practices does he talk about?
Well, he talks about how important it is to get natural light during the day and how the colors you surround yourself with can actually affect your sleep.
Really?
He even goes into ancient practices like Feng Shui, creating that harmonious flow of energy in your bedroom. He even talks about the placement of your bed. Apparently, which direction your head's facing while you sleep can influence your energy and sleep quality.
Okay, now I'm starting to think my totally random, haphazardly decorated bedroom might be sending my sleep all the wrong signals.
But besides all these environmental factors, the book also really stresses routine, right? Oh, absolutely. Veere is a huge believer in setting up those consistent sleep-wake cycles, even on the weekends when it's tempting to stay up late and sleep in. He even gives a sample sleep routine in the book. He says it's all about winding down consciously, like disconnecting from your screens at least an hour before bed, dimming the lights, taking a warm bath, maybe reading a book. Anything that'll signal to your body and mind that it's time to transition to sleep mode.
So it's not just about going to bed at the same time every night, but actually setting up those pre-sleep rituals to get your body to start producing those sleepy hormones.
Exactly.
I can definitely see how that would make a difference.
And, what I really appreciate is that he emphasizes that it's about what works for you. Not everyone needs this big, elaborate bedtime routine, but even incorporating a few consistent elements can really make a difference.
It's about creating those positive associations with sleep, right? So instead of dreading going to bed, you actually start to look forward to those calming rituals.
Exactly.
It really is amazing how much of a difference something as simple as dimming the lights or reading a book can make.
Yeah, it's all about taking back that control over your sleep, really understanding all of the different things that can influence it, and then making those conscious choices to create an environment and a routine that work with your natural rhythms. And Veere really emphasizes that this isn't like a one-time fix. It's more of an ongoing journey of figuring out what works for you.
That's a really good point to end on, I think. There's no magic formula for perfect sleep, but by paying attention to what our bodies are telling us and, trying out some of these strategies, we can definitely improve the quality of our sleep and feel better overall.
Definitely. And he actually leaves the reader with one final thought. He wants people to shift from this problem-directed thinking to solution-oriented thinking.
I like that.
So instead of dwelling on all the things that are keeping you up at night, he wants you to focus on what you can actually do to change that.
So it's like instead of saying, ugh, I'm dreading another sleepless night, you can reframe it as, tonight, I'm going to try dimming the lights an hour earlier and see how I feel.
Exactly. It's about taking those small steps, experimenting, and then celebrating those little victories along the way.
I love it. Well, this has been such a fascinating deep dive. Thank you so much for joining me. I actually feel inspired to start trying some of these strategies tonight.
It's been my pleasure to sleep well.